Back in 590 AD, Rome was ravaged by something they haven't seen in centuries. A plague that they couldn't explain. The only way they could explain it was by saying that they seen supernatural beings, devils with horns, death touching them and then dying shortly a few days later. The bodies were piling up all around the city. No one knew what to do. Ancient Rome was already falling. This was the final death knell. Today is the very final episode of Mysteries of the Eternal City, 12 out of 12 episodes, as we explored everything from ancient Rome to the very foundations of Romulus and Remus, all the way to the high Renaissance and the beautiful, breathtaking sculptures of the Baroque era. However, today we're going to tie all those pieces together, visiting one specific monument that was built in ancient Rome, reused in the medieval era, and then became a place to make some Baroque masterpieces. We're going to learn about the ghosts of this beautiful city. I'm Ariel with Urbanist, and let's explore the mysteries of the Eternal City for our very last episode. We're right now looking at views of St. Peter's Basilica. However, this is one of the most interesting places to visit in all of Rome, because this is not a fortification made in medieval times. This is Hadrian's temple. Right now is known as Castel Sant'Angelo, the angel of the saint, the castle of the Saint Angel. However, there is no Saint Angel. This is named after the Archangel. And we're going to go right downstairs and find out who this angel was and why did this castle change names from Hadrian's temple to the castle of the angel, overlooking this great city of the Eternal City. Hello Denise, hello George, hello Evelyn, hello Brenda, hello Gretchen. So we're looking right now at St. Peter's Basilica. This also boasts one of the best views of Rome. We're seeing the neighborhood of Prati, the passageway which the Pope escaped through when the city was being sacked in 1527. However, the city was also sacked shortly before 590 by the Visigoths, who invaded this very temple and desecrated the very thing that made this temple, this mausoleum, special. And right down there is the Piazza of Sant'Angelo, which we're going to learn about the haunted history of a woman who is known all around Italy, because she was the woman who shook the very foundations of Italian morality during the Renaissance. All right, let's now walk through into Hadrian's temple. So what we're looking at is a temple built in 139 AD, just one short year after Hadrian passed away. He never saw the mausoleum finish completion. However, Hadrian was a lover of architecture, so I'm not surprised that this architecture lasts all these millennia. It's rather poetic that we're ending today's episode with Hadrian, because we started with Hadrian, the Pantheon. It's because of Hadrian, a huge lover of architecture and the arts, also a very strong politician and emperor himself. It's because of him that we have the very images of Rome that have spread all around the world. The namesake of this church is of the angel on the very top corner of it. We're going to learn a little bit more about Hadrian as we go along. But first, Why is it called the Castle of the Angel? Let me know where you are watching from if you're watching for the first time. Right there is the original statue of the Archangel, Michael, who came and descended upon this castle in 590.
Shall we go for a drink?
But what happened in 590? Well, 590, a huge plague struck Rome. For that, we have to go a few years back to 539 AD. Back in the port town in Egypt called Penicillium, there was two fishermen who got struck by a very odd disease. Suddenly they had warts going all throughout their body. They started vomiting blood. Their bodies started bloating. Their skin started blackening. And then within a day or two, they were dead. But even after they were dead, the stench grew more and more and more. More so than any normal corpse. People at first thought, they just got unlucky. Maybe some bacterial infection got them. However, the disease spread. These men landed in Alexandria. And Alexandria, a few short months later, was ravaged by this huge plague. The Alexandrians panicked and started taking their ships to Constantinople, which was the main city at that time, 539 AD. Because Rome, the eternal city as we know it, was already falling by that time. It was no longer as glorious as it was 300 years prior. The Eastern Roman Empire was rising. Constantine made sure that the center of ancient Rome was going to be in modern-day Istanbul. Those people who were panicking, trying to escape Alexandria, brought the disease with them. The emperor at the time was Justinian. His wife was Theodora. They ruled together. Even though Justinian was officially the emperor, Theodora helped Justinian in many, many matters. The plague hit Constantinople and spread all around the city. 25% of Constantinople was dead. 1 in 4 people passed away. There was no one left in the streets. People were afraid to go out. They were trying to bury their dead, but the mountains of dead got bigger and bigger. The necropolises outside the city wall weren't enough. They had to build huge ditches in order to bury the dead, but that wasn't enough either. They tried putting the dead into the river of the Bosphorus, right in modern-day Istanbul, and that didn't help because the dead would just come ashore and bloat and explode, which happens whenever a dead carcass is thrown into the river. Happens with whales. And then they started putting the dead on ships. And these ships, they put them off into the Mediterranean Sea. However, these ships would land in other cities, bringing the disease with them. These deadly, ghostly ships all around the Mediterranean must have been a very haunting sight. The thing is, with this plague, that ended up being dubbed Justinian's plague because the Emperor Justinian was in power at that time, and people blamed the Emperor, even though he was a pretty good emperor overall. This Justinian plague gave people delirium. And as they had a delirium, they apparently saw the devil. Diabolical, demonic creatures in the streets of Constantinople, in the streets of Alexandria, and then later, by 590, in the streets of Rome. Pope Gregory I took over after the Pope was struck with the disease and died. Emperor Justinian himself got the disease and was left incapacitated. His wife, Theodora, took control of the empire, made sure that no civil war was made as Justinian was in his deathbed. Rome itself lost its papal power, and Pope Gregory I had to take control. And then one day, Pope Gregory I is outside the walls of Hadrian's temple, and he looks above the very temple, and sees a bright light. As Pope Gregory I is somewhere outside the temple around old St. Peter's Basilica, he sees the Archangel Michael come down on top of Hadrian's temple with a huge flaming sword. The sighting was seen by a few hundreds of people. It was rather mysterious. Was it the delirium that people had in mass after suffering so much, or was it a real sighting of an angel? That is forever lost in the history books. However, Pope Gregory I saw this as a sign that the end of the plague was already coming, that Rome would be saved. And hence, Pope Gregory I decided to mark this very temple in honor of the Archangel Michael, the warrior angel. Now on top, we'll see a better view, is the bronze version. However, originally, the angel that Pope Gregory I commissioned was made out of marble. It was deemed too sensitive to be exposed to the elements on the top of this temple. By 590, this temple was already converted into a military complex. It was already converted into a military complex as soon as 400 AD. So it really only was a mausoleum and a temple for only about 120 years. This is the original marble sculpture of the Archangel Michael. Someone's ringing a bell. Of the original Archangel Michael. Now, he originally had wings. However, the wings have disappeared, withered, because of the tests of time. Hello, Jagir. Hello, Gladys. Hello, Michelle. I spent ages in there last time. Oh, I love it. Hello, Antola. Can't believe this is the last episode already. Loved your Italy video episodes and we'll miss them. Hey, Bernini, I'm so happy you watched all of them. Oh, wow. Look how gorgeous this is. Really mesmerizing. Really, really mesmerizing. The angel on top is the exact bronze recreation of this angel. Hello, Brenda. Hello, Nick. Hello, Gladys. If you're watching for the first time, let me know where you're watching from. And if you're watching again, what was your favorite thing that we visited so far in this past 12 episodes of Mysteries of the Eternal City? A series of 12 episodes, today being the last one. And the cool thing about this angel is you gotta take a photo with the shadow. Pope Gregory's the first intuition about the angel being a savior upon the city of Rome and the being correct. Justinian woke up. No civil war was fought, and the city of Rome recovered. However, the Visigoths already invaded the Castel Sant'Angelo. What did they do over here when they came inside? Well, they desecrated the most important parts of this mausoleum. Let's take a look. Oh yeah. Touched by an angel, or the shadow of an angel. Okay, let's go inside the castle. Hadrian went from Scotland all the way to Turkey. Yeah, Hadrian is responsible for the largest extent of the Roman Empire, or the beginning of the Roman Empire. If I lose service, bear with me, stay tuned. I'll be going as fast as possible through these tunnels. So we're walking right inside towards the center of Hadrian's temple, modern day Castel Sant'Angelo. And in the center of every mausoleum, well, people call it a temple, but in essence it was built as the mausoleum for Hadrian. In the center of every single mausoleum is the remains of the person who built it. Here is the room where the urn of the cremated remains of Emperor Hadrian laid. However, the Visigoths came. The last emperor to be buried here, to be entombed here with their cremated remains was the very notorious Emperor Caracalla, who we also talked about in the previous episode of Mysteries of the Eternal City, where he murdered his own brother and committed damnatio memoriae and completely removed his entire memory. Well, I don't care too much about Caracalla, so good riddance, Caracalla. However, Emperor Hadrian was overall a pretty good emperor. He might have done a few things out in the east that might have been a little bit controversial, but overall he was a good emperor, especially compared to Caracalla. The Visigoths came here at 590 AD, shortly before the angel popped above the castle. And they came right into this very room, took the urns, smashed them, and threw the remains into the Tiber River. They had an utter disregard for ancient Roman history. The Visigoth ends up controlling a huge part of Italy for a few months. It almost became a Visigothic empire. If Emperor Justinian did not wake up in time. So you can just imagine these huge, gorgeous urns in place right here of Emperor Hadrian, a few other emperors, and Emperor Caracalla. Nothing remains of those urns. They were smashed to bits by the barbarian invaders, the Visigoths, who end up settling in the city of Madrid, which we visited earlier and actually talked about their history. Now, Emperor Hadrian was one of the emperors that was eventually deified and made into a god. And Cindy, hello. And I like the sculptures, like the ones where she turned into a tree. Ooh. So I mentioned that today's episode is literally going to tie everything we talked about. We're going to see two designs of Bernini on the Ponte Sant'Angelo, which united across both ends of the Tiber River. Do you say all my videos are available to rewatch? Yes, they are. Click the videos tab on the Urbanist page on Facebook. And when I'm back to New York City, I'll be uploading them to YouTube.
Ieri invece ho fatto lo show.
Here are marble remains from various ornamentation all around the temple. You can also see some signs. And let's make our way to the exit. And you can see how monumental this temple is. And it's to, I think, Hadrian's praise that he ended up building something that could easily be converted into a huge fort that ended up protecting Rome from being fully conquered either by the Visigoths or subsequently by the Germans and the Lutherans and the Bourbons as well. And here we're outside now. What is this? Well, this was a moat. They flooded a huge part around the castle so they can fortify it even better. And this ended up protecting Rome from the sack of 1527, which we talked about in our episode on St. Peter's Basilica. And you lost me in the tunnel, but I'm back. Don't worry. Hadrian. He got deified. However, Hadrian was responsible for deifying someone else. Who was this person? It was Hadrian's lover. Hadrian loved building architecture, and he built as crazy architecture for the greatest love of his life was neither two of his wives, one of them who gave birth to their son. No. It was a young man by the name of Antonius, who was maybe 30 years Hadrian's junior. Hadrian fell in love with Antonius when he was maybe at the age of 50, and Antonius might have been around the age of 17. Now, at those times, it was rather normal for a emperor or someone of very high status to maybe have a love affair of the same sex. So, both men and women. It wasn't too taboo. What was taboo was how Hadrian reacted to Antonius' death. But how did the young Antonius die? Well, that is the stuff of mystery, because no one knows 100% for sure, but there were rumors. Because shortly after the death of Antonius, we know two things. One, Emperor Hadrian was sick when Antonius and him decided to take a trip down the river Nile. Two, the Antonius was known to follow these religious cults that were still taboo at that time. Three, Antonius never returned, and Hadrian was utterly heartbroken. He wailed, he moaned, he mourned loudly, viciously. People said that they heard Hadrian's screams from his own palace on Palatine Hill. People said that he moaned, at that time, their words, I wouldn't use these same words today. But they said that he moaned like a woman, highlighting that he moaned in extreme dramatic fashion. Why was he so upset? This is where things get weird, because according to the rumors, as Hadrian was flowing down the Nile with his great lover Antonius, who Antonius was later depicted as an extremely beautiful man, he was very sick, Hadrian. And they come upon this tribe of spirit doctors, of shamans. Probably somewhere in the Nile, probably it might have been spirit doctors or shamans from the tribes, the Berbers who roam the deserts of North Africa. Could have been them. Nonetheless, according to the rumors, the only way Hadrian could continue living, and the empire needed Hadrian to continue living, because if he didn't continue living, the empire could collapse. He didn't have an heir. And Hadrian didn't really have anyone he trusted that could take over the empire. Hadrian needed to keep on living in order to not let all of his great works of architecture be destroyed by another careless emperor that might take over. This is one of Hadrian's great works. Now we're seeing from the outside. It was retrofitted with a lot of spaces for shooting cannons and holes for having guns, etc., etc. And the walls were also built around it. And here is the entrance. Hello, Carol. When am I coming home? I am coming home on the 24th of October. This is the very last episode of Mysteries of the Eternal City, our epic series about the history, the mysteries of Rome. And Joshua, good morning. And is the weather always nice here? It has been for me. 2 weeks, only 1 day of rain. The other days have been pure sunniness. Before we walk on this bridge, and don't dare to walk on this bridge on September 11th. September 11th has a very negative meaning, of course, in New York City as well. And this is just pure coincidence, but we'll learn why. Something transpired here back in 1599. So the only way Hadrian was told by these shamans, mysterious shamans in the Nile, maybe they were worshippers of the Book of the Dead from ancient Egypt, could be as well. Hadrian needed to give life in order to get life. But how was he going to have a sacrifice of someone's life? Well, apparently Antonius' love for Hadrian was so deep, so full, that he ended up putting himself up at the stake, willing to be sacrificed in order to extend the life of his own lover, the emperor of Rome, the great architect who built some of the greatest buildings known in history. And Antonius was subsequently either burned or thrown into the river Nile, lost forever. Those are rumors. No one knows if that's true. But people said the rumors nonetheless, and they were very widespread. What truly happened to Antonius, no one really knows. But he was dead, and Hadrian was devastated. Devastated more than any normal person would be devastated from any death. It was extreme to the point that it got people very worried. Hadrian ended up living a much longer life. At what costs, we don't know. But what we do know is that Hadrian ended up deifying the young Antonius. everywhere around the city of Rome and throughout each corner of the Roman Empire. He built beautiful statues of Antonius. Beautiful, pristine face, glowing in the light of these gorgeous marble sculptures. Everyone knew about Antonius, and he built a huge temple in the outer skirts of Rome in his honor. Antonius became a god while Hadrian was emperor. So Hadrian did not only make great architecture, he also created gods. However, he also made this bridge. The weather gods have favored me. They did indeed. The original bridge here was built in 134 AD. And the bridge that we're seeing today is now renamed into Castel Sant'Angelo, same name as the castle right behind us. And two of the foundations of this bridge, it's made out of 4 arcs. 2 of them are the original Roman arcs. So part of this bridge is originally from 134 AD. And there's these gorgeous angels on top of them. These angels represent each of the tools that were used to crucify Jesus when he was a mere 33 years old. Here is the lance that was used to pierce Jesus' side. The huge vinegar sponge in order to pierce his wounds, make him feel even more pain. The bearer of the cross. And here we have the person holding the inscription INR. Now, most of these sculptures were built by various sculptors of the Baroque era. However, 2 of them are from Bernini. The original Bernini ones are not standing here, but they were actually standing in one of the museums here in Rome because the Pope loved them so much. He was so in awe that he actually decided to take them and ask them to be fully recreated here. And the Bernini designed ones are this one, and then also the Lance one. This one. Right there. So those are the original Bernini ones. Gian Lorenzo Bernini, who built the huge colonnade at St. Peter's Basilica, also did the ecstasy of St. Teresa. However, you do not want to walk here on this beautiful red carpet.
Oh, really?
You do not want to walk here on this beautiful red carpet on September 11th. Because according to rumors, people throughout the past few centuries, they have left this bridge desolate on that night because they apparently have seen a woman walk around with her head on her arms. Now, we talked about a very similar sighting back in Paris of the patron saint of Paris, who was martyred, and he also was beheaded and walked around with his own head. If we go into the Piazza Barberini in Rome, one of the other more beautiful galleries, Rome has its own Mona Lisa. Now, Mona Lisa is Italian. It's made by Leonardo da Vinci. And the most captivating thing about Mona Lisa, which I did a video on, is that she looks at you. And you don't quite know who this woman is, but you know that she has a story, something deep, something filled with life and mystery. For the Romans, and for the Italians at large, Mona Lisa is not only that only type of painting. Go to the Gallery Barberini and you'll see a beautiful portrait of a very young woman about the age of 23 years old, made by Guido Reni. Guido Reni painted the portrait of Beatrice Cenci, a beautiful woman also looking at you rather interestingly. The reason she's so famous in Italy, maybe not world famous like Mona Lisa, but in Italy almost everyone knows her name, is because there's countless paintings made by her, countless sculptures, and countless operas. There's about like 4 or 5 operas made after her, and a few movies as well. One of them starring Faye Dunaway many decades ago. But who is this woman? Who is Beatrice Cenci? She was the daughter of a count, Count Francisco Cenci, who lived at the very edge of the Jewish ghetto. And for context, the Jewish ghetto would be more... So here we have St. Peter's Basilica, which is more towards the north. If we go down the Tiber River, we'll end up towards the Jewish ghetto. So actually that's north, so it would be more towards this way. Down this way, we'll end up at the Jewish ghetto, which is on the other side of the Tiber. Well, actually it's on the main side of the Tiber. The other side of the Tiber is Trastevere. So Tiber, the Jewish ghetto would be here. And why is it called the Jewish ghetto? Well, it's because they actually closed up the Jewish population there for many, many hundreds of years, and even gated those places, locking them in every single night. Francisco Cenci lived on the outer edge of that. He was not Jewish. He was a lower aristocrat. He inherited a pretty sizable income, so he was of noble blood back in the Renaissance. However, why is Beatrice Cenci so mesmerizing for most Romans? For that, we have to go back to 1598. Beatrice Cenci's mother passed away. And as Beatrice Cenci's mother passed away, she became the main target of her father. Her father heavily abused Beatrice's mother. Heavily. Beat her, abused her sexually. It was said that outside of the Piazza, Palazzo Cenci, at the outer skirts of the Jewish ghetto, the Jewish residents that were only a block away would hear the screams of Beatrice's mother late at night, every single night. He was fined, he was jailed a few times, but to no avail, because he was of noble blood, so they just let him out early. He never got the punishment he deserved. Her mother passed away, and Francesco Cenci decided that he needed another victim. And that victim was going to be Beatrice and her 3 siblings. The screams were heard every single day following that from the Jewish residents right nearby. Again, he was fined and jailed, but would let go very quickly. He never got any justice. Beatrice fell in love with the vassal of Rome, so one of these soldiers that protects Rome. And her other younger sister also fell in love with the vassal. So they knew these 2 vassals who were pretty strong men who had access to weapons. He also had access to poison. And they decided to try to poison Francesco Cenci's wine. However, that failed. As they poisoned their wine, he got a little bit tipsy, fell down, fainted, but he wasn't dead. They got desperate. Those 4 wanted Francesco Cenci to get the justice he deserved. They took justice into their own hands because no one would help them. They were victims and they wanted to fight back. They got the two vassals to take Francesco Cenci into the top floors of the palazzo and beat him to death. They joined in. They were so filled with anger, so filled with hatred, so filled with just tired of being abused that they just let it out and murdered Francesco. They threw Francesco out of the window in towards the Tiber River in order to frame it as if he died by accident. However, as the papal police force ended up finding the body, they found this suspicious because the window that he was thrown off at was too small to accidentally fall over. And they knew he was forced out of that window and thrown into the Tiber. And especially when they dug up the body, they found out that he was completely beaten to death. This outraged the Pope. It outraged the Pope because Francesco Cenci was a noble. And the Pope had to maintain control. So he especially didn't want nobles being carelessly killed, no matter how much they deserved it. The people were happy for Beatrice, actually. They were celebrating the death of Francesco Cenci. Gone were the screams every night right by the Jewish ghetto. However, the Pope decided to pursue justice on Beatrice and her accomplices. They were brought over here to the Ponte Sant'Angelo, which is the bridge that was used for executions. The vassal that was in love with Beatrice was tortured to death right in this bridge. One of the younger brothers who was involved in the plot, he was only at the mere age of 11. He was the only one spared, but he had to watch all of his sisters be punished. And eventually, Beatrice, as she watched her lover, her accomplice, the man who helped her gain justice, to die and be killed and be beaten to death, she was eventually beheaded by the executioner. Her head was thrown into the Tiber, and she was shown to the entire public. The people were outraged. They were outraged because they knew that this was wrong. Sure, murder is wrong nonetheless. But you got to put yourself in the shoes of that time. Justice wasn't being served, and she decided to take justice into her own hands. The people were outraged, regardless of what we think today morally. That was the case back then. And this shook the very moral core of Italy. And this is why she's so mesmerizing to people today. Because here is a young, beautiful woman who was a victim of heinous crimes. And she took the matters into her own hands. And she was horribly punished for it. A few days later, one of the executioners ended up waking up every single night completely covered in sweat. He said that he had terrible nightmares of punishing this young woman, of killing her. He ended up dying in his sleep. The other executioner who was involved in doing the deed here on this bridge, he was hanging out in one of the areas further down in the area of modern-day Monte, which was a kind of a seedy area in that time of Rome. And he was stabbed to death in an alleyway. No one knows why, no one knows who it was. So what happened to Beatrice? Well, she was dead. However, following the next year, on the night of September 11th, 1600, so that was 1599 and then 1600, people saw Beatrice walk this very bridge with her head in her hands. To this day, people still continue to say that on September 11th, they still see her walking this very bridge. And Romans avoid walking here, at least the Romans who are suspicious of these type of stories. Beatrice is forever memorialized in that painting by Guido Reni in the Palazzo Barberini, and then in countless other forms of media. However, that goes to show that despite this being an eternal city, there is a lot of death and destruction. But amidst the death and destruction, those stories, while they may be sad, is contrasted with the strange mixture of beauty. These amazing sculptures, this amazing architecture, and also amazing food. So what does one make of that? These are just a few short stories of barbarism, of tragedy. And they make for good stories. They're also very sad stories to tell. There's countless other stories of all these men and women who helped build these grand architecture, these grand buildings, these grand sculptors. But we tend to only remember the ones that were dramatic, the ones that were filled with conflict or horror or despair. We don't tend to remember the happy stories. And why is that? Well, at least in these past episodes of Mysteries of the Eternal City, I talked about a few happy stories. Trajan being one of them. Hadrian to a certain extent. And I think it's important that, yes, we might have enjoyment in these haunted tales. I definitely do. It's fun telling those stories in a very morbid, curious way. But I think it's also important to remember the stories that maybe are not so exciting, but the stories that are a little bit more filled with light. Like the Archangel Michael mysteriously coming upon the very top of that castle. Or the great Bernini making these beautiful sculptures of art after he decided to live a much quieter life. Making sculptures all the way till his last very days. Those stories are very deeply interesting. Let's keep them alive. Thank you everyone so much for watching. If you enjoyed these episodes of Mysteries of the Eternal City, press that heart button, let me know. And also feel free to share these videos with your friends and family or any Facebook groups. Let me show you the Ponte of Sant'Angelo one more time. Ponte of Sant'Angelo. Hello, Monica. Hello, Mary. Naomi, good to catch me live. Hello, Debbie. You're doing such a superb job as our virtual tour guide this week. Oh, I'm so happy. It's amazing how many people walk by and don't notice these sculptures. Yeah, I mean, that's why it's so important to notice the smallest details. Not just the grand buildings, but the sculptures, the actual stoneworking, the ironwork that's beautiful here, these beautiful cast iron lamps. There's so much beauty all around us. Why is there a carpet? Why is there cobblestone streets? Who put these cobblestone streets here? All those questions is what I love answering on Urbanist. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in this virtual vacation, this virtual journey through the eternal city of Rome. I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. And keep being awesome. And always keep on exploring. Arrivederci, amici. See you in New York City. Ciao, amici.